Alrighty, welcome back to my channel. Got a lot of good feedback on the valve adjustment, so I've had a lot of people ask me to do a carburetor rebuild. So here we go. On the 1985 and 86 Yamaha XJ700X model, it uses these Mikuni BS33s. They're good carburetors. They're easy to work on. I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to go ahead and rebuild this first one, and then of course once I show you how to rebuild this first one completely, we're going to do the diaphragms, everything in here. We're going to do the throttle shaft seals, do a 100% complete rebuild on this carburetor, and then of course you can do this on your own for the other three. And on the another part I'm going to add to that is on this number 2, there's a broken post in here in the float bowl for the float. It's pretty common on these old bikes. People, those float holders, those posts are a little tight, and somebody will get in there and tap too hard, and then post will snap off. But this was given to me, so I'm going to go ahead and redo it as it is. Now, the carburetor kit's already been done, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it apart just for the training because I've been getting a lot of requests for it. For right now, I'm going to do a part list real quick, and I'm going to show you what you're going to need for this rebuild. Generally just a needle nose plier. We're going to need a thread chaser if you can come across one of these. This is a M6 by 0.05. It's fine thread. This will be going in here to chase the fuel air screw mixtures. Every carburetor I've rebuilt, these needles are sometimes hard to get out because somebody's obviously been in this before, because in the factory they'll put a plug in here and somebody's drilled the plugs out, and a lot of times that's exposed, and rainwater gets in there, junk, dirt, whatever. If you don't go back in here and plug those off, so it makes those threads really hard to get out of there. And that thing's brass, that brass needle in there. And I've seen some of these break off, and I've had to go in there and drill them out, and it's not good. It's not fun. And another thing I'm going to show you, this is going to be the carburetor protector for when we do the butterfly in here. And the reason for that is, if I can show you, when it comes from the factory, if you can see these screws inside here, these factory screws are peened on the backside, and when you flatten them out, you're not going to be able to screw them out, so you have to go in there and grind these down. And you don't want that grinder getting loose in here and marring anything. You don't want that. These butterflies are hard to find. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a piece. You can just get a simple sheet metal, and we're just going to bend it over to the edge of this right here. So you want to do it from the length of this butterfly to the bottom of that steel shaft. And this will look like this. Okay. And what that does, it's kind of hard to see in the camera, but that piece of metal blocks that butterfly and keeps it from chipping. You don't want that cutter to hit that butterfly. You don't touch it. And then for this right here, we're just going to make I just made a piece of sheet metal, cut a little slot in here. You're going to fit it in just like this. Okay. And what that does, when that fits in there, that when you put your cutter in there, the cutter can hit this piece of metal and not the inside of your carburetor. So when you go in there and grind that bolt off, you're protected in here. Of course, when I finish this side, I'll pull this out and slide it over to the other side. So here, if the cutter gets loose, and it has, and it will, if it does slip, it'll hit this piece of metal and this piece of metal, and not hit the butterfly or the inside of that carburetor. If you hit the inside of that carburetor, it'll throw your vacuums off, and you don't want that. This thing has to be smooth on each side, so it has to be even. So just keep that in mind. So just make a piece of cheap sheet metal, slice a little slot in there, and then of course make your little piece of sheet metal, and just have that lip go long enough to cover this piece right here down to that throttle shaft right here. You want all this protected in here when you use your cutter. Alright? Simple things like that. Of course, Phillips screwdriver, obviously. Now what I did is I made a float bowl gauge over here, and all this is just a simple, instead of using the glass tube, you know, when you put your gauge in here and you have the little glass tube, it's kind of gets in the way. So what I do is I just take an L-shaped plastic fitting. You cut the tip off just a little bit, and all it does is fits in here. So when you go to adjust your float, and if you look right here, the book says 3 millimeters from the side, and which is about right here. So that's easy because I cut that, so you can see when the gas hits this spot right here, then you'll know that it's 3 millimeter. So it's real easy. It gets out of the way of that tube, that glass tube. I really don't like using it, so I just use this, and I'll put a little mark right here, and that makes it 3 millimeter off the sidewall. Of course, I'll go over that later with you, but I'm just telling you. Just get a piece of cheap L-shaped plastic, and then just stick a tube on here and cut it to the length of this right here. So it's like a pre-cut length, just under where the little carburetor sets right there. Real easy to make. It's simple. Okay? And that's about it. We're ready for part 2. Alrighty, welcome back to part 2 here. Okay, I've been getting a lot of questions about which carburetor kits do I use. On this side, we have K&L. You can see that. Okay, on K&L, and on the right side here, we have the stuff made in China. And in my opinion, they're both okay. It just depends on what you're going to do with them. Now, the main problem that I see with some of these kits is, now K&L is going to be an exact duplicate of a Mikuni's, like the needle and seat here. Now, the only way you're going to tell these two apart, even though they look the same, is inside the length of the K&L. If you measure inside this length, it's going to be, in general, 11.10 millimeter. And if you look at some of these Chinese-made ones, they're going to be generally around 11.55, and I've also seen some around 11.70, give or take. They're always going to be a little bit longer on their aftermarket here, okay? Now, you say, what does that matter? I've used both of these in the carburetors. The Chinese last just as long. There's nothing really wrong with them, but you just have to remember that some of these needles from the Chinese made, since they're a little bit longer, I have bought some kits from these places overseas, and some of these are shorter. So, and also on the K&L, right here there'll be the numbers stamped on here, which for the XJ700X model here, it's going to be 2.3. Of course, on the Chinese-made ones, there's not going to have anything. But since I have used these in the past, I haven't had any trouble. The problem is sometimes with your jet settings, you know, versus these Chinese versus Mikuni. And I'll go over that with you. But and I'll show you right here to get started. Now this is the Chinese-made seat, and here's the needle. Now if you look right here, the only differences you can really tell on these is the distance between the bottom of that wire and the top of that seat. It's a little bit bigger of a gap than on the K&Ls. And I'll show you what the difference is in them. You set that in there, you can see it's actually noticeable. It sets just a little bit lower. Now the problem is that I've run into with some of these Chinese-made kits is sometimes these needles, they'll throw in a short ones. And if you try to put a short one in here, the bottom of that wire will sit on the top of that, on the lip here, and it won't be long enough to shut the gas off down here at the bottom for the rubber part to fit in that slot. It just won't do it. So if you do end up buying these Chinese-made ones, just be sure that make sure that you use the right needles. Only because some of these are actually longer. And you might have to adjust your float heights a little different. Just measure them, you know, maybe 1 millimeter taller. And I'll give you a story. A friend of mine rebuilt his carburetors, and he used the Chinese kits, and he says, well, it's still flooding out. So when I pulled the carburetor apart, I knew exactly what it was. I could see it. The bottom of that wire was sitting on the top of this. There was nothing sticking out. So in other words, that needle that he had in there was too short to block off the gas. I pulled these needles out, put the longer ones in, and it worked fine. But if you can see, there's definitely a noticeable difference in the aftermarkets. The aftermarkets will always be a little bit longer. For instance, let's just show what comes in these kits versus the actual genuine Mikunis. This Chinese kit this is your air needle screw, and if you can see, if I can zoom in, if you see this one here, I'll try to match them up here. Okay, this one is a genuine Mikuni, okay, and it is a fine thread. This one is the aftermarket, and you can see it's just slightly longer. And another difference you'll see is that if you ever look at it under a magnifier, this needle is just a little bit thinner, and this one's just a little bit thicker. But it's okay. It still adjusts right. It's not a problem. Because what you want adjusting is this part. Now you can see it's a little bit. The Mikuni is shorter, but now here's another thing that they throw in. See how this one's a little bit longer, way longer, and it's also a coarse thread. So sometimes when you buy these Chinese aftermarket kits, you don't get the right parts in there. So this one you're gonna have to throw away because it's a rough thread, and it might work in another carburetor, but it definitely will not fit in the BS33. This is an M6 0.5 millimeter thread, so this one's a coarse thread. So, but it did come in one of the kits I got, so you can't use it. But I'm just showing it as an example. So we can throw this one away because you can't use it in the BS33. But if you can see, this needle is just a little bit longer than the Mikuni, but it's okay. I've used these and they're fine. As you can see, part of this is longer on the top, which is irrelevant. What we're interested in is the needle right here. And they both fit fine in the carburetors, even though this is a little bit longer, it's a little bit thicker. It's not a problem. I've used these before and they're fine. And that's just one example of using these aftermarket Chinese parts. As you can see right here, for your pilot screws, they're going to be the same. If we put these side by side, this is a Mikuni. Put it right there where the bottom of that thread is. Now they look similar, but if you can see, this is just a little bit longer on the aftermarket. And also on the Mikuni, there'll be a number here. It'll be stamped. Of course, this will be blank. So when I rebuild a carburetor, I do use the Chinese parts, but I don't put these back in here. I use genuine Mikuni because I need those specific numbers on these. Like on the jets, on the Mikuni, the numbers will be on the top. And then if you can see on the Chinese ones here, they're blank. There's nothing you can see on there. It's blank. So what I do is I generally throw these away and go to strictly Mikuni because I need these numbers. I want to make sure that that's a 105 and that's a 35. And I'll give you those numbers here in a little bit. But with these Chinese ones, you just don't know what you're getting. They're not numbered. They're not labeled. Who knows what those numbers are. So what I generally do is I do buy the Chinese parts along with the K&L parts. And that's only because each kit has specific things that I need in there. The gaskets that I use, of course the rubber seals, all these parts in here, they're useful to the build, but I'm just saying for specifically, I use K&L seats exclusively, and then I have used these, but you just have to make sure that the needles are right. And then for the jets, for the Mikuni jets, I do use genuine Mikuni parts because I really need those numbers. If it says 35, I need that 35 in there. That's the only difference I want to cover. And like I say, these aftermarket air screws, they're fine. They work great. But just remember, some of these are fine and some of them are, of course, that they send you. So it's kind of a gamble what you get. Like I know on eBay, when you look at the pictures, sometimes the picture's not exactly what you're going to get. So just be careful of that. The BS33 takes these fine threads, not the coarse. but I have used these and they're okay. Alright, I'm going to put this on pause and we're going to get set up for the carburetor here.